Two, three. And into the next
Next life
life
with
with
Drew
Drew
and
and me, Chip
me.
Chantry.
Woo! We nailed it, buddy. We nailed it. Drew Garrison, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chip Chantry. How are you?
I am staying dry as I can on the rainiest day that I think I've ever experienced in my life.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I feel like there have been rainier days, but okay.
It's up there. It's up there. Yeah. I mean, there's no arc building, but it's getting there.
Did you ever do stand up in Washington State?
I have in Seattle, I did. And it
What?
was yeah, I did. There was an old club, I don't think it's there anymore, called Parlor Live, and I did it was my first stretch of weeks. I remember being very lonely. Everybody says everybody's depressed in Seattle, and I was one of them. It was probably, God, 12, 13 years ago, and I did my first week at Helium in Portland, Oregon, and then I drove up to Seattle and did a week in Seattle at Parlor Live, and it was kind of rainy, but I was there in the summer and it wasn't as I lucked out. There was some nice weather, but definitely caught some rain a couple of days.
Hey, man.
Have you been out there before?
No, I've never been to Washington State. I've
Yeah.
never been to Seattle. A friend of mine went and he brought me back a book of like grunge stuff and grunge facts
Oh,
about grunge music and
perfect.
a Nirvana t-shirt. So that was
I mean,
great.
it's authentic. I was definitely a grunge kid. That hit me right, not to age myself too much, but yeah, that hit me right at I mean, Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nevermind dropped my freshman year of high school. So like I was the key demographic for that. I mean, just and then Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins and Alice in Chains, all that stuff is definitely my high school years.
Nice. Well, we can kind of get right into it.
Yeah.
You sent me a list of songs you really liked, of
Mm-hmm.
like absolutely favorite songs.
Yep.
I feel like kind of like the grunge stuff kind of transitions into the pavement song, Cut Your Hair.
Yeah. Yeah. That is pavement. I got into I wish I was like that super cool kid in high school that knew about Pavement. Like I was the kid. We all knew Nirvana. We all knew Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkin. Like I said, all that. And then like, but there were the cool alternative kids who. Do you know Tim and Eric? Do you know who Tim and Eric are? Like
I
from like
know they're from Philly,
yeah, Tim and
and
Eric's
I
awesome
know
show.
like it's like anti-comedy.
Yes, yeah. So Eric was a year ahead of me in school. We went to school together. He was a year ahead of me. We actually went. It's funny.
Awesome.
We grew up going to the same church, and we went to Sunday school together. He Eric and I were, and I was a year behind him, and he was in like that cool alternative, kids that like they were like those listening to some of that cool stuff that like I was like I bet you I would probably like that, but I felt like I wasn't cool enough to listen to. But then I got into Pavement a couple years later, and Pavement is now it's my favorite band of all time. Love Pavement. I don't know how much you know them, listen to them, but "Cut Your Hair" is sort of like their anthem. It's their biggest song, and it's just ridiculous. It's silly. It's making fun of the music industry. It's it's them sort of they're just this sort of slacker band that I love. That was like again going back to the grunge stuff, which I love, but that was always so serious. And this is just sort of like snotty and sarcastic and much more who I am now and just much more let's just have fun and make fun of everything rather than getting sad about everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love it.
Um,
It's if you don't know the song, just put it on, go for a drive, go for a walk, go for a it's just an anthem in being in just being ridiculous.
yeah, like I quickly listened to it before the pod, and I thought it's like it kind of has like an ambient quality to it,
Mhm.
as a lot of like Pavement does, but it's also kind of very raw, and it
Yeah,
has parts that are very raw.
yeah, very raw.
And
They never like a few of the guys. They never really, like obviously a lot of bands they form and they struggle for years and they do whatever. These guys, a lot of them never even lived in the same city. So they never rehearsed that much. So they would just sort of get together and play. And they were kind of known as being just sort of sloppy slackers. Like they were never that tight in concert, but like it was just fun and it was just the energy. And to this day, I still remember, and you can go and watch the video for Cut Your Hair. And it's again, it was probably done for 10 grand. And it's just the members of Pavement waiting to get their haircut in a barbershop. And it's just silly and dumb. But it was on an episode of Beavis and Butthead. And so like Beavis and Butthead are watching the video for Cut Your Hair. And I still remember it. I think it literally sums up Pavement the most. Yeah, Butthead was just like, these guys need to try harder, and that's exactly who Pavement is. They're just sloppy. They have great songs, but they just kind of don't give a shit, and it's the best.
um, yeah, like I don't know if there's like art house music,
Uh-huh.
but it kind of seems like a European style art house movie where it's just something on screen and it's
Uh-huh.
up to you to follow it and it's up to you to draw whatever you want to draw out of it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like they do like that's a lot of their, like a lot of their lyrics are kind of cryptic and their song titles are just weird. And so they're really smart guys, and but I think they're again just screwing around. So it sort of lets the listener kind of decide what they want it to be.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love these guys. These guys are my favorite band of all time.
I should definitely like listen to more of their stuff. I think at some point probably heard an album.
Yeah, they're one of those bands too where it's kind of layered. Like when you first listen to it, uh, like Cut Your Hair is pretty right over the plate. Like you kind of get it, but like a lot of their stuff is there's a lot of noise and it's a lot of people are like, what is this? But then it's one of those like kind of like earworm things. Like you listen to it 3 times, you just find these like beautiful melodies like underneath, and you're like, wait a minute. Did that just sound like that? And you listen to it, and but you hate the song, but by the third or fourth time you listen to it, it becomes your favorite song. It's like I have so many of those moments with this band where it's just like, oh my god, they have these great melodies underneath all of this noise.
mm, yeah. If you like Pavement, I would recommend anything by like the lead singer of the Pixies, like Frank Black or anything like that.
All right, stop right there, Drew. Maybe my second favorite band of all time is the Pixies. Love the
Mm,
Pixies. Yeah, definitely contemporaries. I Doolittle is up there as one of my favorite albums of all time.
mm.
I love the Pixies so much, and going back to that grunge stuff, like I think a lot of people know this, but like if you're a fan of like 90s music and you don't know the Pixies, like listen to Doolittle. That's literally that, and like Surfer Rosa. And like they've admitted, like Kurt Cobain admitted, like they're like, we were just trying to make a Pixie song when they made Smells Like Teen
Yeah,
Spirit. Like they're just like
absolutely.
they are the blueprint for 90s rock was the Pixies. Yeah, maybe my second favorite band. Love the Pixies so much. And
Yeah,
I've seen them in concert maybe like 5 times, and they're great.
that's great.
Hmm.
Um, I saw them in concert once.
Oh, did
It
you?
was
Where?
really interesting. It was in a music festival in Atlanta. It was at
Oh, wow.
the Shaky Knees Music Festival,
Okay.
and we didn't stay for the whole set
Uh-huh.
because Tame Impala was going to be on the main stage, and we wanted to see Tame Impala.
Sure. Yeah. Great band.
But Pixies were right up before Ride, who
Okay.
was going to play after, and they're kind of like a similar kind of grungy band.
Hmm.
So um it kind of has that vibe going. Yeah, like they played a lot of hits. I think they saved Where's My Mind until the end, so
Sure.
didn't get to hear that,
Yeah.
but they had someone like Kim Deal playing in the band. I don't think Kim Deal was there. So,
No, when did you see them roughly? Do you remember?
2015.
So yeah, that was probably I think her name was Paz, who she's like this where is she from? Is she from South America somewhere? But amazing bass player. And oddly enough, it was just announced like literally 2 weeks ago that they parted ways with her. So she was after Kim Deal,
Oh,
it was she was the Paz was the like the basis for like a bunch of years, and then they just parted ways. I don't know if they fired her or like it seemed like a weird thing, but they got rid of her, and now there's apparently a new bass player. But she was great. Yeah, she like filled in for Kim really well.
yeah. Definitely like the sound they had was great,
Hmm.
and they definitely still sounded like they did in like the 90s and the 80s, and like
Hmm.
they still kind of like kept that sound. Yeah, I think Bossa Nova is probably one of my favorite things that they did.
So okay, I I am right on board there. Everybody loves their first album, Surfer Rosa, which is it's a great album. It was groundbreaking, has a bunch of great tracks, and it just has a sound and a feel to it. And I think like a lot of people, like even like Dave Grohl from Nirvana, was just like such a huge fan of that album and when it came out because they were of that age. I think Surfer Rosa is good. I think there are a lot of great tracks. But Doolittle by far is my favorite, and Bossa Nova is right up there. I think it doesn't get the credit it deserves. It is it's cause, and I like pop stuff, like I like, I like noise, I like whatever, but like I want a hook, and you could put on bossa nova beginning to end. Every song's a banger. Every song's got a great melody. It's fierce, but it's concise, and it's just song after song, bang bang bang. Yeah, by far, Doolittle, bossa nova, they're my two favorite of the Pixies album by far, and I don't think bossa nova gets the due that it deserves.
No, like I think Dig for Fire should be put on the radio.
Why it's
Like
not is
I could
it's
listen to that
absurd.
song every day of the week. I could listen to it.
Yes, Dig for Fire, Allison, I mean, just everything on that song is just it's a pop hit, it really is.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um,
Valoria,
uh,
great song. Just yeah, there's so many. You can just keep going on. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, and I know from listening to the Fight Club commentary that Brad Pitt listens to the Pixies, and
Yeah.
he really liked that "Where's My Mind" was at the end of that movie. Like he said that it's like really a stellar track from the
Hmm.
Pixies, and it just kind of wraps everything up really well, and kind of it's like the perfect song for that.
It's so good. And they I think a lot of like filmmakers have realized that Pixie songs just with that kind of tapestry of sound that they have they're in so many movies. Like I think the big one, like Fight Club, was one that really kind of kicked it off, and that's just it. But they've used Pixie songs in so many different movies and TV shows over the years, like in more recent years, that they just keep going back to that well because it's so rich
Yeah.
and
Um,
they're great for cinema.
I remember Joseph Gordon-Levitt singing "One in 500 Days of Summer."
Oh,
Um,
okay, yeah,
I I forget which one it was. I think it was off a Doolittle. Um,
yeah. I
but
oh god, yeah. I forget.
yeah, that was really good though.
Yeah,
And
I think I'm looking it up right. Actually, I cheated. I looked it up. He does again, which is just a pop masterpiece. Should be on the radio more. I think he sings "Here Comes Your Man."
you're right.
Yes.
It is "Here Comes Your Man."
Yeah.
Probably next to "Dig for Fire," probably my favorite Pixie song because I feel like I could just listen to it like again and again.
Uh, Totally. And that was the first one that really hit me when I discovered them a little bit late. Again, it was probably like maybe like the year 2000 or something. They had just broken up and, or I mean, not just broken up, but they had broken up. And it's such an accessible song. And I actually listened to an interview with Joey Santiago, like a podcast with him. You know, he's the lead guitarist, and he was like, "Yeah, we didn't really like that song. Like they wrote it, and it's a great song. And I guess Frank Black had written it like years and years when he was like a teenager, and." They were just like, we didn't want to be known for that song because it is very different. Here Comes Your Man is very different than most Pixie songs. It's
Yeah.
silly and poppy, and like much of their stuff is like a lot harder, and but it's an undeniable great song. Oh, I got a story for you. This is crazy. So um get some other 90s goodness here. I'm a big fan, and I almost included one of his songs. I'm a big fan of the band Soul Coughing. Do you remember Soul Coughing from the 90s? They did Circles, Super Bon Bon, all that.
I remember them showing up on a lot of lists, but
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think I heard a lot of their music.
Great band led by this guy Mike Doty. He went by M Doty at the time, but crazy band. Like you've definitely heard some of your song. Like if I played some, you're like, oh, I know that song. Like it's one of those ones
Oh,
you would know it. And they had broken up around '99, and then but I was a big fan of Mike, the lead singer, and he has since had a really great. He's put out like I think over a dozen solo albums. They're great. I've seen him in concert a bunch of times, and the first time I saw him was in August of 2001, and it was at the North Star Bar in Philadelphia. He
yeah.
was opening it, and it was just him and a guitar at the time, him and an acoustic guitar, and that was my favorite version of Mike Doty. But he was opening for Grantley Phillips, who was the lead singer of Grantley Buffalo, which was a great '90s band that I love. I loved Grantley Buffalo. So my brother and I and our friends went to see Mike Doty open for Grantley Phillips, who we liked as well. But the opening act, Drew, was this guy who was just this like he wasn't a musician. He was this like sort of like mad scientist guy, like almost like a Bill Nye Mr. Wizard thing. Like he was kind of doing like
Mm.
a kids show, science show, but it was obviously for adults. But he was just this silly guy, and he was like, and like the one thing that I remember he did, he like filled a bass drum with smoke, like from a like a fog machine, smoke machine, and he was hitting it to like show like the smoke rings, going out to, and he kind of explained how what the physics behind that was. And he was silly and entertaining, but he was like teaching science facts, right? And I was like, this guy's just fun, and I'm learning stuff, and it's just goofy, and everybody's loving it. And then we just go on with the rest. Then Mike Doty comes out and he's great, and Grantley Phillips comes out and he's great. And for years, I wondered who that guy was. I was like, is that guy just a local Philly guy? Is he traveling with them? And that's the early days of the internet. You couldn't really look it up too much. And I was like, this guy is great. Like, and for Drew, for 2 decades, it was always in the back of my mind, who is this guy? Right. I found out on I was listening to a podcast literally like 2 years ago. That guy is I'm getting the name right. I think David Lovering, the drummer for the Pixies. That was the drummer for the Pixies, was the mad
Oh,
scientist guy. And
wow.
he was hilarious and amazing. He's like a magician too now, and like he does magic, like the Magic Castle in L.A. and like does it. Yeah. So Pixies, multi-talented people.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like you see musicians always have like creative interests and things like that,
Yeah.
and they might do different things. Yeah, um, not sure how much you listen to Queen, but uh, um, uh, Brian May, the guitarist, actually has a doctorate in astrophysics,
That's right. Yes. That
and
is it's crazy.
he has like a few books out and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And I did get one of the books from my dad, and he loves it. And
Oh,
it's
that's
kind of
great.
like a big kind of 3D map of like space
Oh,
and
wow.
things
Oh,
like
that's
that, which is
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I mean, just from Bohemian Rhapsody to that, that's incredible.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. And just when you kind of said like kind of like mad scientist, like for whatever reason, that just kind of reminded me that when I read the Tripty Martin autobiography, Born Standing Up, he
Yep.
started out as a magician. Like
Yeah.
he did magic, which was really interesting. And he said he
Yeah.
always wanted to be a magician. That was
Yeah.
like his number one thing
Mm-hmm.
was magic.
That's
So
great. Yeah.
sometimes like the creative interests that you see people succeeding with aren't always like the only thing they're interested in. So,
No, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. It's awesome. So yeah, the other day I had asked Chip if there was a sports icon that he really liked. So
Mm.
Chip, what would that sports icon be?
All right. So it's not one specific person or like icon. It's a team. I'm a Philly sports guy. Yeah, I'm not a huge sports fan, but like I love my home teams. Uh, but this might be my favorite team of all time. I think it's one of the most popular teams of all time. And it's one of those things that I've literally never heard anybody not like this team. I think there's honestly three groups, three things on earth that I think are sort of universally loved that you can almost not argue against how great they are. You got the Beatles. Like, who doesn't like the Beatles, right? You know what I mean? It's like they're
Yeah.
objectively the best. The Muppets. You got to, who doesn't love the Muppets? If you don't love the Muppets, something's wrong with you. And then my sports icon, which gets, I think, a lot, not enough credit. Uh, it's the Harlem Globetrotters. I love the
Oh,
Harlem Globetrotters so
cool.
much. Um, have you ever seen them like live? Did you ever go?
No, no. Like the spinning the ball on their finger is kind of the thing I know the most from them. And I
Yep,
remember in the 90s, like they toured a lot and sometimes they came to Philly and things like
yep.
that. Um, haven't got a chance to see them.
I my we got to see them in my parents took it, my brother and I actually do a bit about it, about how they took us when I was like 7, 8 years old to go see them at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. And it was amazing. And then the next year they took us to a 76ers game and I was so bored. I was like, this isn't fun. Come on. I want to see some like fun. That's not what this is what basketball is. And but so I actually did. I used to have a podcast with James Heskey and we would like cover different topics. And I covered the Globetrotters one time and I did some research and I even realized like I think some people kind of laugh them off. Oh, they're this silly thing. They do all these tricks. They have this crazy history, and I won't take too much time, but like they really broke the racial barriers for the NBA. Like back in the day, there it was only white players in the NBA, and they like it was one of the Globetrotters that then like broke the color barrier and like played for an NBA team. They used to play. It wasn't the NBA at the time, but like in the 30s and 40s, like, but it was the major. I forget what the league was, but they would just do exhibition games because they like weren't allowed to play, and they would just like clown these teams. They were just so good and they were a competitive team at first, but they were so good that they just started doing these tricks and these antics and it just got but they became like they would just travel from town to town and do these exhibition games against these different teams and people everywhere would just pack stadiums, just pack to see them. It was so crazy at one point they became like ambassadors of the United States. There was a time they went like they would travel Europe, they would go to South America. In the 50s, I think it was 50s or 60s, there was a war. It was like a civil war going. I forget exactly where, but there was a civil war going on in South America. They were doing a game or like a series of games in there. The war stopped for like 3 days so people could go see the Globetrotters. And then they left and the war resumed. And then a different time, this was like, I want to say this, I might have the timeline wrong, but the 60s, apparently the US did not have good relations with Argentina. Like they weren't on diplomatic terms, like for whatever reason, I forget why, but it was like the Perones, like the whole Avita thing, Ava and the Perone, the Perones were in charge, and so like the U.S. was not in good standings, and like people in the U.S. were even telling the Globetrotters, they're like, "Don't go, they're not going to like you, that you could be in danger, whatever." They played, I think, 3 nights, and over 100,000 people came to see them each night in the stadium. And the one night, the Perones literally showed up, and the president, I forget his first name, but Perone, he literally did like the tip off, like he threw the ball up, did the first they like the jump ball, and there's video of him and his wife sitting on courtside, laughing their asses off, like loving the game, and like they took pictures and saw and talked to the Globetrotters afterwards. They flew home the next day. The United States and Argentina were back on diplomatic terms because the Harlem Globetrotters came down and they love the Globetrotters so much. So it's and they and again, not to get too long, but like they went to, and I think in the early, it was like 1951, they went and played in Berlin. This is 6 years after World War II, Hitler, the whole thing. They went with Jesse Owens, who Hitler like refused to shake Jesse Owens' hands, 15 years
Okay.
beforehand. And again, they were like, this might not go over well. I think it was, I think they thought maybe 10,000 people would show up. I think it was like 75,000 people came to watch them play, and like just like welcome them with open arms. The mayor, I think it was the mayor of Berlin, gave them this like huge reception, and they're just like this, they're beloved around the world. Just, and I think besides the fact that they're great and they're fun, it's I think they have such a crazy history that people don't realize.
Yeah, it sounds like globally they've been able to do a lot of things too. I actually didn't know they went to different countries. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's they travel. I believe they still do. I don't know, but yeah, they're always so much fun. I highly recommend if you've never seen them, if you're listening, go check out the Globetrotters one time because it's so much fun.
Yeah, and kind of what it sounds like you were saying, Chip, is like not to spoil people by watching the Globetrotters and then watching like the regular NBA, but it can be a good way to learn about the sport and learn about basketball in kind of a lower key way because it's not as competitive. It's kind of a lot of tricks like
Yeah,
uh I'm thinking like maybe a little bit similar to some of the competitions that they have at the All-Star game for like basketball, like things like
exactly.
that.
The dunk contest and all. Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, so definitely check out Harlem Globetrotters. Hear their shows are great.
Yeah,
So check it out. Um, nice. So we're actually running out of time, but Chip, a play that you had shared that really kind of stuck out for me was Fiddler on the Roof.
yeah,
Um, um, I haven't seen the play. I actually hadn't seen the movie until about a year ago, and
uh-huh.
really liked the movie. I thought it was really good. I thought like super compelling. The story's great. The main character who's the milkman, I think he's great, very likable.
Hmm.
Like he's kind of like the everyman, like
Yeah,
type guy. Like he's the
definitely.
everyman that you just kind of fall in love with. So
Exactly. Yeah. The reason I like uh, this musical so much is so I was a theater kid in high school. I did all the plays and everything. And my junior year of high school, we did Fiddler on the Roof. And
great.
so I was Fiedka, the Russian soldier that marries the one daughter. And it was so much fun because it was just like that was my favorite part of high school was like doing these plays. And the re the reason we did Fiddler that year was I was a junior, a guy who's still a good friend of mine, this guy Dave Hobbs, who is this amazing singer. Just this voice. He was a trained opera singer, and he's a composer, he's a director, he does all this stuff. But he was the perfect Tevye, and was just, I mean, just brought the house down. And it was just so. Not only do I enjoy the musical itself, but just like those memories of being in high school, being one of those theater kids, hanging out, doing all the rehearsals. It was so much fun.
Nice. Yeah, I guess I wasn't in high school when my high school did that.
Hmm.
They probably did it like years before. Like when I was in like middle school, the high school put on a play of like Miserable,
Oh
which was
wow,
really
yeah,
good and like really adult content and adult topics. And like I remember watching it and thinking like,
yeah,
is this
absolutely,
actually a
yeah,
play? Can they do this kind of stuff in a play? Like I thought it was really interesting.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, getting back to Fiddler on the Roof, yeah, it has a timeless quality about it, and like I feel like the romance is like really kind of intense, it's visceral, it's very true, it's very pronounced. Like I'm sure like people have done things like Fiddler on the Roof, Where Are They Now? Like what do you think the characters end up doing?
yeah,
Like in just watching it, I feel like the oldest daughter made like a huge mistake, like trying to marry for love, like childhood friend, like um the tailor, which I think she would have been better off with the butcher.
yeah, 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 yeah. But, what would have happened? What could have been?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure somewhere on the internet there's like tons of fan fiction and things like that.
Oh, I'm
But
sure.
yeah, if you haven't seen Fiddler on the Roof, check it out. It's a great play. It's a great movie. It's a really cool story, and yeah, definitely check it out. So we are just about out of time, but Chip, thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much for having